Hello, everyone. Dr. Yonit Arthur here. You are on the Steady Coach. And as always, it is an incredible privilege to bring you a success story interview. This one is with Brock. Brock is someone that I have gotten to know very well through our membership community. So it is a special honor to share his story with you today. Brock has fully recovered at this point from visual symptoms associated with PPPD, as well as a lot of fatigue and other things that we will talk about later in this interview. And Brock suffered for 2 years before he recovered. So he has a story to tell and he has lots of advice for you on how to get better as well. I think you'll learn a lot from this interview and get some inspiration as well. For those of you who have this question, we did not cover this in the interview, but Brock did not use any medications to get better from chronic dizziness. He did try an SSRI for a day. It gave him side effects he didn't like, so he was not on SSRIs during his recovery process. He did report that he took some sleeping medication at some point in the process to help with some of the sleep issues he was having, but he stopped taking them several months ago and has not needed them since. So, without further ado, I'm going to share this story with you. Please enjoy it. And as always, if you like these kinds of stories, please comment and let me know. Please please share this video, and please subscribe to my channel so that I can reach more people. All right, enjoy. Hey, Brock.
Hi,
Welcome.
thanks for having
Hey,
me.
hey. As I said before we hit the record button, it is so cool to actually get to meet you in person like this.
Yeah, likewise, this has been something I've been looking forward to, and thankfully it's happening sooner than I anticipated.
I know, I know. We had talked about maybe in September later this year, you're going to be down in my neck of the woods. We thought, oh, maybe we'll do that in person. But you're like, hey, I got to tell this story now. I mean, I'm better. So I said,
Yeah,
okay, I'm not going to make you wait till September.
yeah. It's hard enough to remember everything that's gone on the past 2 years, and I knew if I, as good as I'm feeling now, putting it kind of behind me, I didn't want to wait and forget some of the details.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that because I actually just interviewed another person who said, I almost didn't even send you that email because I was just feeling good and I just wanted to put it behind me. And so
Right.
I appreciate that. I think it was the right decision to come on now.
Yeah.
So, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about who you are?
I'm Brock Gerard.
Mhm,
I live in Western Arkansas.
mhm,
I've got three kids,
mhm,
26, 19, and 10. So I'm a
mhm.
professional parent, is what I like to
Yes.
say.
Yep.
I've been married for about 21 years.
Mhm.
Um, I've been in advertising for 20 years. I've been at the same advertising agency for most of that time. Um, I like motorcycles, golf, and concerts.
Mhm. Yeah. And all of that, all those things involve a lot of movement. I'm just thinking about like you could not have picked three things with more vestibular heavy requirements. So
Yeah,
I can only imagine what happened to your world when all this started.
yeah, yeah. It was a
Yeah.
struggle.
Yeah. So how did it all start? I obviously I've only known you kind of in the last part, thankfully, of your journey, but how did everything begin?
Yeah, it started in March 2021,
Mhm.
and the symptoms were very mild at the time. It was when I first noticed it. If I was driving and a cool motorcycle or a car, something passed
Right.
me, I would turn my head to get a little bit longer look, and when I would come back, there was this moment of instability, almost like my
Yeah.
brain was catching up.
Like a
Um,
delay. There was a
Definitely,
delay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't a spinning. I called it dizziness even then, but it was never a spinning dizziness.
Mhm.
It was like that delay. It was very visual.
Mhm.
Um, so I thought, "Oh, that's weird. I've probably got some sinus stuff going on." Um, and so I gave it a couple of weeks, and when it didn't go away, I called my doctor, made an appointment, and they got me in. And of course, they checked my ears and said, "Well, you don't have an ear infection, but you do have some fluid." So they put me on a round of antibiotics, and so I went through that, and there wasn't much improvement after that. So I go back. Then we just started down this path of chasing what it might be.
Mhm.
And so that started with um, blood work. Um, I probably need to back up at this point and kind of preface a few months before that. So in September of 2020, when I was about to turn 40, I guess I had a midlife crisis, and I thought, I got to get in better shape. I've got an 8-year-old at home, and I need to be able to keep up with him. So I went to the doctor just to get a physical, just a checkup. And so they, in that blood work that came back, they determined that I had extremely low testosterone. So I think they told me I had the testosterone levels of a 67-year-old. And
That's always
so,
great to hear.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we started testosterone replacement therapy at that point. So that was in October of 2020. Within about a week of that, I caught COVID. And then over the next few months, I changed my diet drastically, and I lost about 40 or 50 pounds, which I think was
Wow.
between my diet and the testosterone, making it easier to do that. So there were a lot of changes that happened all at once. And so when the dizziness came on a few months later, I was like, okay, could it be the testosterone? And could it be the
I
diet
remember you
changes?
asking me that.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was one of my early questions. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Mhm.
right. Okay. So just to be clear, none of this started with COVID. And I think you and I would both agree that COVID has nothing to do with this. The virus itself, rather, I mean, has nothing to do with the onset of symptoms. But you
Mhm.
had some of these kind of dramatic changes in health while you were in the
Yes.
months preceding the
Mhm.
symptoms coming on. But it
Yes.
doesn't. It didn't sound like you had any, big bang type of event or a major illness or anything that really identifiable before they started?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
And so going back to after the symptoms started and they started doing the blood work, one of the things that my I had to donate blood because I was on testosterone and my blood was thickening, and so I would donate blood from time to time. And so between that and high blood pressure, they determined I had high blood pressure. So um, then they thought, well, okay, it's low iron. It's from donating blood, so they tested for that. A test came back that said I had low ferritin, not low total iron, but low ferritin. And so they actually started talking about doing an iron transfusion at that point, which I went to the doctor not long after that, and those numbers were normal, too normal to have changed on their own. So that was a false
Oh.
reading. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
Um, and so, like I said, we were just started checking iron levels, the high blood pressure, anything that might, basically throwing stuff at me to figure out what maybe
What might
dizziness
stick?
could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I ask, how freaked out were you about this? Like, when it started happening, was it like, "Oh my gosh, this is ruining my life," or was it just like, "Well, that's kinda weird. I guess I should get it checked out?"
When it first started, I wasn't concerned. Like I said,
Mhm.
my first thought was, it's sinus related. I've always
Mhm.
had sinus issues my whole life.
Mhm.
So I thought I probably got fluid in my ear or something like that. But as time went on and there were no answers, and I kept getting passed on to other specialists or things like that, then I started to get freaked out because there's no answers.
Mhm.
Um, I'm going to all these doctors who were supposed to, I'm so used to going to the doctor. Oh, you've got this. Here's this medicine, or here's this. You're fixed. So yeah, it escalated pretty quickly when I wasn't getting answers.
Yeah. Well, I'm just imagining Brock, the Brock of 2 years ago, if he only knew what he was gonna end up having to do to get better, or
Yeah.
what world he was entering. So they were giving you no answers, and while this was going on, what was happening to the symptoms? Were they kinda staying mild, or were they getting worse?
They were progressively getting worse.
Mhm. Okay.
Fatigue definitely started to set in. Uh, my biggest symptoms from the beginning has been visual symptoms, and fatigue, physical and mental, I think.
Mhm. So, like,
But I
brain fog mentally,
definitely,
and then
yeah.
fatigue, like, just feeling exhausted all the time.
Yeah, I have a desk job, and there were times whenever I would have been at my desk for 3 hours or so working on something, and I would stand up, and it felt like I had run a marathon. My
Mm.
leg muscles were exhausted, and for no reason.
So you noticed some tightness, I mean, or some fatigue in your legs too. It was physical. It wasn't just like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I'm tired." You actually your body actually felt tired.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So can you give me a sense of what happened next? So you went to all these doctors, there were no answers. Your symptoms are progressively getting worse. They're starting to become, it sounds like, somewhat debilitating because you're trying to work and you're exhausted. So what happened next?
Yeah. So they did send me, the doctors, after they ruled out those things, they sent me to Little Rock to an ear specialist, an ENT there that
Mhm.
my daughter had actually seen when she was a child.
Mhm.
And so I had hearing tests. Hearing tests came back normal. Um, whatever other, you whatever the test is where they put you on your side and turn your head and
Mhm.
all that
Positional
came back.
testing. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Everything was normal. So they sent me home again, with no answers. Um, so of course, I'd come back and then I'd make another appointment with my regular doctor and say, okay, now what? Um,
Wow.
yeah. Um, Sorry, I have my notes over here, so I'm kind of referring to my timeline.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, in
You're so organized. I appreciate it because 'cause I'm all
Yeah.
over the place. So, Brock, I'm glad you're keeping us on track.
So that went on most of 2021, and then in November of 2021 was where I hit rock bottom. Um, I ended up, I think, in hindsight, I was having anxiety, and panic attack issues, but
Oh,
I never dealt with that, so I didn't know even that that's what was going on. Um, so there was a day that I just got up from my desk late in the day. I felt so horrible. I just left work and went to the emergency room. I didn't tell anybody. I just went, and so they started doing some other tests, EKG, to make sure I wasn't having any heart issues. Um, I don't even remember. There was more blood work. I don't even remember everything that they tested me for. Dosage test, X-ray. Um, I don't even remember everything at that point. But I'd also been having trouble sleeping at this point, and a lot of that was I would, which I think now is the panic attacks that I know. But I would wake up in the middle of the night. There was just a rush, and it would feel like it started at my head and just went all the way through my body. And it would wake me up out of a sleep. Um, and I couldn't go back to sleep after that. So I dealt with that a little bit before I went to the ER. Um, when I was in the ER that first night, they checked all the stuff out. The doctor said, everything's checked out, so we're going to send you home. I was exhausted at that point. So I said, okay, good. I'm going to go home. I'm going to sleep. I slept for about 2 hours, and from midnight to 2, and then it hit me again. And so my wife took me back to the ER. And so I spent about 36 hours, more or less, in the ER between 2 days. Um, my mother has a pituitary tumor,
mhm.
and so that was something that had come up in discussion at some point. And so I already had a brain MRI scheduled before I went to the ER. Um, but when I was in there, that was one of the things that they expedited. They said, we're going to go ahead and get that done. That came back normal. Um,
Did anyone at any point, like, ask how you were doing? Like, did anyone say, "Hey, how have you been doing? Like, what's been going on in your life for the past few months?" Did anyone ask about that?
no, no, but I will say this: in that ER stay, we the doctor that I had the first night, he was on when I got back, and he was really attentive. His bedside manner was great, and he had kind of told me, he said, "Okay, we're going to do all this stuff. We're going to do all these tests." And I said, "What do I have to do to get admitted?" because I was wondering, okay, if I can get admitted, then I can get some of these other tests done, or I can see some of these specialists without having to wait 3 months. And he said, well, we have to find something first. Insurance won't let us admit you unless we find something. So he said, we're going to run all the tests we can to figure out what's going on. He went off of duty, and another doctor came on before they had completed all those tests they said they were going to do. And he decided that, we're going to discharge you and we can't find anything. My wife got to him before I did. she, she jumped on him. And one of the things that he said to me at that point, he said, have you considered that this is anxiety? And I took extreme offense to that. And so did my wife.
Understandably.
Because
yeah.
everything I was dealing with was so physical. Yeah. There's no way that there's not something physically wrong with me. So in hindsight, he was right, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but gosh, there's a reason why I don't use that word a lot on my channel, because it really makes people feel so like ignored, and like it feels like their horrible physical symptoms are being downplayed. Oh, it's all in your head, just anxiety. It sounds like they're being written off, and that's not what's happening. I feel like and I don't know, but I feel like if doctors said, hey, it seems like this is a central nervous system issue. This isn't a physical, physical tissue damage problem. This is a central nervous system sensitivity issue. But it's essentially what they mean when they're saying fight or flight mode or anxiety, but it's not like, oh, it's all in your head. Like you're making it up. So
yeah.
I totally understand why you took offense, because it is offensive when you feel as physically miserable as you did. And obviously you had some physical dysfunction going on in your body at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did. He might as well just told me I was crazy. That's the way that I took it. Okay, right. You're just crazy.
Right.
I know that's not what he meant, but that's the way it felt in the moment.
Had you ever had anxiety prior to that? Like, ever had any mental health stuff come up in your life?
Never.
No? Yeah.
Yeah.
I get you. It is here we are now, so you'll be able to kind of explain how you see it now. But I don't think it's very helpful when someone's never experienced any kind of mental health issues to say, oh, yep, you've got a mental health issue. Go see a psychologist. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So after the ER stay, you still had no answers. They found nothing. The MRI, I assume, found nothing.
Right. Yeah.
And then it was just go home and figure it out.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And that's essentially what I did. They did. I booked another appointment with I got an appointment with an endocrinologist. Like I said, my primary care physician is the one that put me on testosterone. Mm-hmm. And so I got a referral to an endocrinologist to find out, because in my mind, I'm still thinking this could be the hormonal thing.
Yeah.
And so got an appointment with him, but again, 3 months out, so that doesn't help me much right now. Mm-hmm. In the ER, they did tell me they felt like I needed to just stop the testosterone, to which I did. Cold turkey.
Ooh.
So there were, most of the months following that, I felt like, as bad as I felt like it probably was withdrawal from a crash from the testosterone, because I read a lot about this.
You felt even worse.
Yeah. I probably didn't start to feel any better at all until, I guess, probably the middle of 2022. I just kind of got into where it's like, all right, this is life now. I got to deal with it. So that's what I did.
Mm-hmm. What did that look like? Like, what was daily life like at that time when you were just dealing with it?
I woke up every day feeling like I had the flu. That overall, that's how I felt. It's just like when you're sick,
Mhm.
but you have that, you can deal with it because a week or two you're going to get over it and you're going to feel better again. But it was waking up with that every day, thinking to myself, every day from here on out could feel this way. So it was a struggle.
Yeah.
But I said, I've got kids and I've got responsibilities at work, and I I just had to push through.
Wow. So you just were living this kind of miserable half life
Mm.
for years, for like at least a year and a half.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds though like you weren't done um, looking for answers though, because eventually you found your way over to me. So that tells me that
Mhm.
you were still kind of looking for a way out of this.
Yeah. I didn't stop. I had to tell myself that I had to prepare that things weren't going to get better.
Mhm.
But I didn't stop. Like I said, I saw the endocrinologist. He just said, "Yeah, I don't think this is your issue." Um, so I checked that box. I had a referral to a neurologist who reviewed the brain MRI. Um, what he told me was he thought that I probably had a vestibular nerve get damaged at some point, and he felt like it would eventually resolve itself.
Mhm.
And you're going to like this one. And then he said, "I don't want you to leave empty handed. So here's a prescription for a motion sickness patch."
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very helpful. Yes.
So I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, yeah,
Well,
here's a brain specialist.
yeah.
Maybe, and so again, it had the opposite effect. Going for answers, having some hope, and leaving even more hopeless.
Yeah. Yeah. And basically it was like, well, here's a medicine and just kind of go live your life and eventually it might go away.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So you were plodding along and somehow you made your way over to me. So how did you find me? How did you find my stuff?
I didn't find you soon enough, but I'll tell you how eventually I did. Um, in January of 2022, when I was just researching YouTube, I guess, for dizziness related things,
Mhm.
I ran across, and I don't know if anybody else has ran across her, but I ran across this girl, young girl, named MJ Styles is her YouTube channel.
Yes. Yeah,
And
Megan.
she
Mhm.
was describing her triple PD.
Mhm.
And so I was at work and I was watching this video, and I'm sitting at my desk and I'm listening to her and she's explaining what I'm going through.
Mhm.
And finally I just had this release, start crying at my desk. I'm just, wow. Okay, here's somebody who actually knows what I'm going through.
Mhm.
And so I watched all of her videos. She doesn't have a lot, but
Mhm.
she was just explaining some of the VRT exercises that she did and all that. So I clung on to that for a while.
Mhm.
I did get a referral to a vestibular rehab. Um, but when I went in there, everything that the exercises they were having me do, I was already doing them. So like, you don't need to come back. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Did the
So I did that.
exercises actually bring on symptoms for you when you did them?
No,
No. So what
no.
what did? Let me just make because I know people are gonna be asking. So what at this point when things were just miserable, like steadily miserable, can you just describe what the symptoms were like besides the fatigue I know
Mm,
and feeling like you had the flu? You mentioned the delay in your vision. What else?
mm. Um, let's see. I have a list of all my symptoms here
Awesome.
somewhere.
Go for it.
Where did I put those? Um, maybe I didn't. Maybe I had it in my head. It's from the very beginning. It was always very visual, and
Mhm.
so the the scariest thing to me was the derealization, the literally feeling like I was sitting. across the room watching myself have conversations with people. It was outer body experience is the only
Mhm.
way I know how to explain it.
Mhm.
Which it that was scary. That was, I think that had me more concerned than anything else. And that's when you don't have answers. Like, yeah, there's something wrong with my head. I don't care what the brain MRI says. I'm crazy.
Yeah.
Because I'm not
Yeah.
even living on this planet anymore.
Yeah.
Um, so that was pretty constant. Most of my symptoms didn't really come and go. They were once I had them, I had them.
24
Um,
hours a day? Like, no
mhm,
matter what you were doing?
yes, I'm not going to say some things didn't make it worse. Sitting
Mhm.
behind a computer scrolling. I got to where I would have trouble reading, especially emails. I got to where I was turning my brightness down on my computer. Um, I would turn the overhead lights off in my office and just have a lamp on.
Mhm.
Everything, my vision seemed sharp, but almost like everything had a halo on it. It was, and I had multiple eye exams during all of this too to rule anything out. And no, your vision's fine. Um, but I had those kind of visual issues. I said the fatigue, brain fog, just feeling exhausted all the time.
When you walked or moved around, did that make things worse?
No, when I was at my absolute worst, I never fell, but I did have some times where I was really bad and I would bump into things. I couldn't
Okay.
judge, I guess, exactly where I
You
was in
couldn't judge
space.
distance? So,
Mhm.
was being in large spaces like a mall or a big shopping center, would that mess with you?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So
Mhm. And
yeah.
driving?
Driving at times actually made me feel better.
Hmm. Oh, yes. Love that.
Yeah, yeah. I
Neural
never,
dizziness. Just crazy. Yeah.
I did. I didn't ride my motorcycle much for 2 years because I just
Imagine.
felt like it wasn't the smartest thing to do. Um, but I never felt like I had issues to the point that I was scared to drive.
Mhm.
Yeah, symptoms were there, but
Mhm.
I didn't feel like I was a threat to myself or anybody else.
Yeah, but you were just not feeling great doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
just doing pretty much anything.
Mhm.
And so it sounds like things were just worse when you were trying to do something visually stimulating. So, like, what about patterns and carpets and bright lights and
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
supermarket
And
aisles?
yeah, bright lights. Definitely. Like I said, I got to where I was, even one of the times that I went to the eye doctor, got new glasses. I had, I put the blue light blocking um, lenses in and everything, just trying to reduce all of the stimulus as much as I could.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks for that. I know people are going to ask because as you've probably noticed, everyone has kind of the set of symptoms that he or she finds the most difficult.
Mhm.
And the ones I don't know if it's just what I'm remembering now, like nowadays from my YouTube comments, or if it's just that this is so common. People really get freaked out by the visual symptoms. So it's really
Mhm.
good to know. And I remember you posting about the birds on the curtain. So
Yeah.
can you explain what that is?
Yeah. So every morning when I get up, my routine, I sit in my recliner, drink coffee, and my wife has these balances above the windows that are
Mhm,
across the room from me, and they have like sketches of birds
mhm.
on them. And for whatever reason, and there's a light that's right above it, so I can see it pretty clearly across the room. And I would look at those birds every day, and for over 2 years, they vibrated. Um, they were literally vibrating. But one day they weren't.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, I was so excited about that, and I remember showing it to Philip, my husband, and he was like I showed your post to him, and he was like, "What do you mean the birds aren't vibrating?" And I'm like, I guess this you just have to get it. You just have to understand neural circuit dizziness in order to understand what a victory this is. It was so cool to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're getting there. We're getting to where you started getting better. So I interrupted you. So you said you found Megan's channel. You were doing VRT really without much of a change. And what happened then?
I think at that point, I just started to improve quite a bit just because I convinced myself that I had medical clearance.
Okay. So you already kind of had the sense of that this there was nothing physically wrong with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Hmm.
But I also didn't have a lot of hope that things were going to change. I,
Hmm.
I, I think I just kind of thought, well, okay, this is what I have to deal with. I
Hmm.
have medical clearance. That's good. Um, but I'm still just going to have to learn how to live with this.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. And then when did you find my channel?
Um, Back in January of this year. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
for context, it's now June of
Yes.
2023. So here we are. It's not even a full 6 months later. And here
Yeah.
we are having this interview.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was your reaction to finding my channel?
Well, not unlike when I found the original video
Hmm.
where I learned the term triple PD. But watching your videos, I probably watched them all. I would turn them on while I was driving and not watching them, just listening. But just taking in as much as I could uh, from what you were saying, and especially watching these videos and being able to relate to other people who were recovered, who would explain the same symptoms or some of the symptoms that I had, and then for them to be able to say, "I'm good now. I'm over it." That gave me a lot of hope, and so I jumped right in. I got your workbook. I watched your videos. Um, got into the community and started, interacting with folks there. I got Dr. Russell Kennedy's book, Prescription RX, and then I started taking care of myself. I didn't know that
And
I wasn't before, um, but apparently I wasn't.
yeah, wow. I, you tell me if I'm right about this, but it sounds like if someone had told you at the very beginning, "Hey, you know what, Brock, you gotta take care of yourself," you would have been like, "What does that have to do with my eyes? Like, why are
Yeah,
you talking about that?" But it sounds like you kind of had to go through this process to realize like that had everything to do with what was going on with your eyes.
yeah, yeah. I don't know that there was really any other way to do this. Because I wanted to go to the doctor. I wanted them to find something and to give me a pill or give me a procedure and fix it. And until I exhausted all of that, I don't think I would have even. There's a chance that I may have run across one of your videos at some point and discounted it early
Mhm,
on.
mhm.
Um, I don't think I was ready to accept that diagnosis yet.
Well, it's on one hand, it can be really empowering, but on the other hand, it's like, "Oh my gosh, you're kidding me. Like, how do I do this? Like, this is I can
Yeah,
take a pill. This is what are you saying I have to be nice to myself? Like, that's what?"
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I get that.
Especially when you don't know that you're not being nice to yourself,
Right,
or yeah.
right. Yeah. So,
So,
yeah, so you mentioned the community, mentioned the workbook, you mentioned watching all the videos, the success stories. So, um, can you give me an idea of what your routine looked like? Like, what did you so you're taking in all this information, and what did you start to implement in your daily life?
yeah, well, I started doing somatic tracking.
Mhm,
I set an alarm on my phone once for mid morning and once for mid afternoon. Not that I always did it both times, but
mhm,
it gave me an opportunity to make sure that I got it in at least once a day. So I would come into my office, I would shut my door, turn the lights off, put my headphones in,
mhm,
and do that. Um, I realized that. I carried a lot of tension in my body, and I came across that from Dr. Russell Kennedy and what he was talking about holding tension in our body.
Mhm.
So I started being conscious about my breathing and um, making sure that I wasn't tense, and that's hard to do. I mean,
It
I
is really
realize
hard to do.
I'm tense all the time, even
Mhm.
when I think I'm relaxing.
Mhm.
Um, I started going to weekly therapy. Um, I started getting a monthly massage, first time in my life.
Wow.
And then I got back to doing the things that I really truly enjoy that I had stopped doing when I felt too sick to do them. So I got back on the motorcycle, started playing golf again. Um, I never really stopped going to concerts because that's something that my oldest son and I always have done together,
Mhm.
but I started enjoying them again.
Mhm.
Um, and I realized that the calm, laid back attitude that I've always been proud of as being my personality was probably the source of all of this. I'm a people pleaser, and I hold my emotions in. And so I told my wife, I said, I'm going to start letting stuff out. And so, yeah, that's cool. So I did all those things. And eventually I guess it all paid off. Like I said, it was a lot sooner than I expected because we are coming to Florida in September, and I told you, I said, I'm going to do my video in person.
I
And that
remember.
gave myself a goal for September, and oh, happened a lot quicker.
Wow. Wow. You make it sound so simple. People are gonna
No,
watch this, and they're gonna be like, "Wait, so you breathed and relaxed and you got better?" Oh, but I wanna point one thing out, and you can tell me if I'm right about this, but I have what from what you're saying, I'm also hearing that you had a lot of outcome independence. So, you started doing those things, but it wasn't like, "Oh, I've gotta get rid of my symptoms right now," or "This is specifically to get rid of my symptoms." You really it sounds like you really internalized the message, like, "I have not been taking care of myself. I have been repressing my feelings. I have been holding tension in my body." And it seems like you kind of independently addressed those things, and just the symptoms took care of themselves. You weren't doing it as a, "I'm fixing my symptoms right now." Am I right about that?
yeah, definitely. And and that's hard to get to that point, and that's where I say I don't know that I could have gotten to that point without going through everything else that I went through
Mhm.
before. Um,
Yeah.
because you just couldn't convince me that everything that I was dealing with was anything other than something physical.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, what I'm hearing you say is reaching that point of acceptance, there's nothing physically wrong that explains my symptoms was
Mhm,
a huge I mean, it's what allowed you to move forward with that kind of
mhm.
kind of outcome independence, as I call it.
Yeah, yeah. Whenever I would, even in this process, and I started to feel better a little bit in small increments, but the
Mhm,
symptoms were still there.
mhm,
But I did a lot of telling myself that I'm safe. I'm safe in this moment. I'm safe in this moment, or that helps a lot. Um, One of the other things I did, and I think it was Mark that you did a video with early on, when he was talking about accepting when he would have a flare up, he would be thankful for it. I said, "Oh, this is exactly what I need." I couldn't quite get there, but when I would have the symptoms in my eyes, would really it's always been my biggest issue. But I
mhm.
started telling myself that it was my superhero X-ray vision kicking in,
Oh, I love that.
and
Oh.
it would kind of make me laugh. But that was kind of my way of accepting
Mhm.
the symptoms, I guess, and not letting them bother me. I wasn't, it was just a joke to my brain, I guess. It wasn't a big deal.
You showed fearlessness. I mean, that's ultimately what that is, and for some people, it looks like compassionate, like, Oh, yes, brain. Okay. And then I love what Mark said. I remember what he said because I find myself quoting him at people all the time
Yeah.
when he said something like, I realized this was the exact this was the exact medicine that my brain needed to get better.
Hmm.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, like bring it on. Bring it on. But
Hmm.
what you did is another perfect example of that, of just showing an utter lack of fear
Hmm.
toward the symptoms, even though they're unpleasant and no one's denying how uncomfortable you were, but you developed kind of this way of turning down the fear dial.
Yeah. Yeah. And it didn't come easy, and it took a long time to get to that point. But once I once I really came to terms with this being neural circuit, I started to understand it.
Mhm.
And I'll give a pretty good example is back in October, we took a trip to Albuquerque, and the day before we left, I felt really, really bad to the point that I was ready to call it off. It's like I'm not going to make this trip. Um, but I decided to push through, and for the next 5 days, I drove to Albuquerque, drove back, had a great week with my family, and was pretty symptom free. And as the very next day, when I got up and sat in my recliner, the birds were vibrating and everything was back. And I used that as an example, I guess, of my brain associating that chair at that time, those birds, that cup of coffee, with all the terrible times that I had had previously in that exact spot.
Mhm. So you were gathering evidence even before you really knew you were gathering evidence. You were
Yeah,
gathering evidence too.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, I know you were a very active member of our community. I'm
mhm.
wondering how that contributed. Was it just kind of a source of support or reinforcement? Like what role did that play in your recovery?
Yeah. It played a big part because, like I said, the times that I felt the best was whenever I could relate to somebody. And
Mhm.
so being able to get into that community and read somebody else's post about their tough time and giving them encouragement, or, when I was having a tough time, posting myself so I could get that feedback. It was huge.
Mhm.
You don't feel like you're out on an island by yourself, because I felt that way for a long time, at least a year and a half.
Yeah. What a big message of safety. Even when you're miserable, it's not going to fix you, but it's such a message of safety to your nervous system that everything
Mhm.
really is okay. If there are others in here who can understand and you're not in it alone, that's already a huge weight off of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I talk about a lot in my videos, but we especially hammer in the community is just kind of getting a sense of where all this pressure came from. And you have already touched on this a lot. You mentioned I have this calm personality. I was kind of a repressor. I want to take care of other people and I kind of put my own feelings aside, and you've worked on those things. Was there anything else that you identified that was a big source of some of this tension that led to symptoms?
Yeah. In hindsight, I think it wasn't having COVID, but it was living through the pandemic and the changes that came with that.
Mm,
Um, just seeing how our society changed. Um,
so
and
polarized.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that had when I look at the timing, when I look back at the timing, I think that had a big part to do with the initial symptoms. It was just living in a world that was completely different than what it had been before. And I think that was more of a shock to myself than I was even telling myself that it was.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, I just want to say there's a reason why we're seeing so many people with these kinds of symptoms right now. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the pressure and the stress surrounding the pandemic. I think it was awful. Um, but I also wanted to mention, if would you have described yourself as an anxious or high stress kind of person prior to all this happening? I
Never.
mean,
The
absolutely
opposite.
not, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah. The
opposite.
opposite.
Yeah. And I want to say this publicly, because I feel like I say this a lot, but probably not on YouTube. Um, People who end up with neural circuit dizziness come in in many different places on the spectrum of tension, right? But in general, people who end up with neural circuit dizziness are the ones who cope too well with stress, not the ones who are like constantly falling apart from stress.
Mhm.
So I want people to hear that, because I want them to see you and hear your calm voice and see you're this kind of quieter, calmer person, not at all like anxious and neurotic.
Right.
And yet, actually, the calmer you are, the more likely it is that you're actually being affected and internalizing this stuff and not
Mhm.
getting it out.
Yeah, like you said before, having, I just think my stress bucket filled to the point
Mhm.
that it tipped over. And
Yeah.
you've talked about that a lot. And I do think that's what happened with me. It
Mhm.
was, I can always operate with a lot of stress, because I am laid back and don't get too
Mhm.
wound up about things, but
Mhm.
it finally spilled over.
Yeah. Yeah, and you didn't have an outlet. I mean, again, those people who we think of as falling apart under stress, when their bucket, gets 3 feet from the top, they're just emoting and, having, drama, and you're not. It's gonna take that pressure cooking cooker being filled to the absolute brim for you to have, um,
Yeah.
a need for that pressure to release, but when it happens, it's gonna really it's gonna really happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so how are you feeling nowadays?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Um, Normal.
Mhm.
I didn't think I'd feel like this again. I really didn't. I even thought that if I did, it was going to take a long time, or maybe that my new normal would, I would get used to it, but it wouldn't be the way that it was before. But,
Mm.
and that may be the case for some people, but I feel good. I feel normal. So I'll take it.
Yeah, so no limitations, no symptoms, just normal life now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
okay. I would consider myself 100%. I occasionally have a little, I do, but I think it's normal. I don't think that it's anything that's to be concerned about.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I turn too quickly or I do a somersault or I walk outside in the heat for a while, I'm not gonna feel normal either. I mean,
Mhm.
that's normal. We kinda want your body giving you signals when you move too quickly or when you're, you know, doing a somersault or cartwheel. I have 2 young kids, so the somersault and cartwheels are heavily on my mind. Your kids are a little older, so that maybe less for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although your 10-year-old might still be doing some cartwheels.
Yeah, he might.
Yeah. So, all right. So, what advice, if again, you've kind of laid out from top to bottom what you've done. What advice do you have for people who are going through this right now?
Get medical clearance. Do the test. Make sure everything's fine, and then look inside. Think about what could be your source of stress, even if you don't think you have stress. I didn't think I did, um, but in hindsight, I know that I did. Um, Take care of yourself. Use the tools that you have. Dr. Yo has laid out for us so graciously. By the way, thank you.
Of course.
Um, it's it works, and don't be skeptical. It works. I think there's enough of us now that can say that it does. Um, but use these tools. Get in the community. Talk to people. Watch the videos. Log into the Q&As. Ask your questions. Um, yeah, and just try and get yourself to that point where you can realize that it is neural circuit. It's not physical. It is, you can change. You can change your your brain in this situation, and it works. It's hard when you're in the middle of it, but it works.
Living proof right here. Yeah. Yeah. When we first got on, or right before we got on air, I said, I have mixed feelings hearing your story because on one hand, it makes me so happy because here you are, like living a normal life. But then on the other hand, I think of the 2 years, and we talked about how, you have to take the journey you have to take. It takes people different amounts of time, but um, I really hope I can save people from having to go through things for that long.
Well, and that's why I'm going to do this. And I've told my doctors, I've told everybody that I can about this, because I know that, I mean, those of us that know what's going on, no matter when we found out about it, there's so many more that don't know.
Yeah.
And may have been dealing with this for decades.
Yeah.
And got to the point where I was, it's like, well, this is just life. I just have to figure it out from here on out and deal with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, scream it
Yeah.
from the rooftops.
Yeah. I'm trying. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm trying to do. And as you said, the more people I can bring on to share stories, the more people are going to see it applies to them as well. So
Mhm.
I cannot thank you more warmly for agreeing to do this. I know it's, you volunteered your time, and it's also taking you back to some difficult times, and it's a vulnerable story to tell, like to say, hey, I had to go to therapy and had to be nice to myself and get a massage. I mean, it's not always so easy to say, hey, I
Yeah.
I, I had to do that, but
Yeah.
it does work.
I'm going to add one more thing just because we didn't touch on it, and it was a big part of it. Um, the hopelessness and the depression that, I'd never been an anxious person, never been, felt that I was overly stressed. Also had never dealt with any type of depression, and it was there. It was scary, and that sense of hopelessness that, I've always had this mindset that, well, depression just means you're really sad. No, it was very chemical. It wasn't just thoughts. Um, so take care of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And first of all, good for you for first of all normalizing this, because it really freaks people out when they see those thoughts going through their heads, or when they
Mhm.
feel like you're saying, it's like very visceral. I mean, it's like your whole body feels like that level of hopelessness. So it's both normal and not permanent.
Mhm.
Even when it feels permanent in that moment, it's not. Here you are. None of that. It's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Wow. Thank you so much for this. I think this is going to help a lot of people hearing this.
I hope so. Hope I can do my part.
You are. And again, 2023 is the year of the success stories. I'm feverishly trying to interview as many people as I can possibly fit onto my schedule. But I of course, I have a special place in my heart for you, because I got to know you, being part of the membership community, and you were at those Q&As for every week for a while. And so I'm sad that you're not in there anymore, but I'm much happier than I am sad, because it means that you don't need it anymore and you can like go live your life, which is the whole point. So
Yeah, it's bittersweet because I want to continue, and I think I'll stay in the group, in the community for a while.
mhm.
But at some point I'm going to want to put it behind me and move on.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you, Brock. Thank you.
thank you.
All right. So, folks, if you have questions for Brock or for me, or comments, please drop them below. And if you enjoyed stories like this one, please let me know in the comments, because that will spur me to keep doing this. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. All right, Brock, thank you. And thank you everyone for watching.
Thanks.
Bye.